You're looking at the new DS7 E-Tense performance line, which, as its name suggests, is both partly electric and quite sporty, especially in design. So that means it fancies its chances against cars like the BMW X3, which, as we know, are very, very good. So let's see how this thing compares. All right, so welcome to the pretty big interior of this DS7 E-Tense. It's a pretty big car, although it's a mid-size SUV, believe it, because it actually goes up against, as I said, the BMW X3 or the Audi Q5. You can get way bigger cars than this, but this thing feels pretty big from behind the wheel, and I think a lot of buyers are going to like that. You sit quite high in the car, the interior is pretty big around you, and you can see that big prominent nose ahead of you. Even as you go down the road, it seems to just iron out bumps and pummel over them with its mass. But it actually does have a few features which are shared with other DS models to help it in that regard. Firstly, it's got that adaptive suspension that you might already know from other models, like the DS4 we drove the other day, which uses a camera up top and then tells the suspension to either soften off or stiffen up if needs be, depending on the road surface. And it does work pretty well. It means the car feels a little bit soft and squidgy at moments and a little bit roly-poly, but actually it's pretty good, and it's ironing out a lot of the rough imperfections on a road surface here. Now, the powertrain in this particular car is the same as the one we drove in the DS4 the other day. That means it's got a 1.6 litre petrol engine, turbocharged, and it's also got an electric motor, and it'll produce the same 225 horsepower and 360 Newton meters of torque, which is pretty good. But of course, this is a much bigger car. So DS has had to upgrade the battery that powers that electric motor to enable it to actually achieve pretty good electric performance. So it's gone up and it's over 14 kilowatt hours now in this car, but it also does mean that you get over 40 miles of claimed electric range, which for something this shape and this heavy is pretty good actually. And it feels powerful as well. I mean, in a normal hybrid mode as we have it here, it's quick to respond, the electric motor's good. All right, when the petrol motor picks up from the electric, it's not rapid, but you do get a nice smooth surge of acceleration. But really what's most impressive in this car is actually how nippy it feels in electric mode. Put my foot down, it's quite nippy. It's a lovely elastic power delivery. It just feels like from any point, up to 83 miles per hour, this thing will do in electric mode, by the way. It feels like at any point it will just pick up with the same enthusiasm and the same feeling of acceleration. It's pretty good. You can probably hear now the beeps and stuff as well on the dash. It's because this thing, along with all that electric stuff and that hybrid powertrain, has loads and loads of tech aboard. It's got so many driver assistance features. I mean, you've got all your standard stuff like your cruise control, your adaptive cruise, but you've also got steering assist, and you've also got your cameras ahead of you and behind you to make sure everything is safe. And we'll talk about the reversing camera on this in a bit, because it's going to be quite useful, I think, given the size of this car. But let's see how it goes around bends. I've got it in electric mode. Let's click through into sport mode. It doesn't feel like a naturally sporting car, despite what the performance line trim suggests. And I think that's going to be a key reason why some buyers who maybe otherwise would be tempted towards an M badged or an M Sport badged BMW X3, they might not see the same level of excitement in this car. But for those who are looking for a slightly more sporty drive, well, yeah, I think a BMW M Sport model is still going to feel a little bit more interesting. But that being said, this does go round corners all right. I can demonstrate on this bend here. If I just tip it in, there's a bit of body roll. It feels quite old school in its roly-poliness, but then it does sort of settle. It squashes the damper, and then it just settles, and it doesn't keep rolling over. So it doesn't fall over on itself, but it also doesn't feel particularly sporty. Other thing to note is the fact that this car's brake pedal feels really natural. It doesn't feel like it does in other hybrid cars where you sometimes have a sensation through the pedal when the car's switching from regeneration tech to natural braking. In this, it just feels really natural, and the brakes are nice and powerful. Yeah, you have to squeeze them quite hard to get them to work, and that, for some people who like over-assisted pedals, might make it feel like they're weak, but actually they're not. They're really powerful. You just got to press them a little bit harder. By contrast though, the steering is very, very light. I mean, in all modes, it's really light, very low effort. Nothing in the way of steering feel, but I mean, it's an SUV that suits the character of the car. Now, this is the 225 horsepower model. You can get more powerful plus 300 horsepower versions of this car with all-wheel drive, but because this is about 45k or just over that, I think this one's going to sell in much larger numbers. And it's only front-wheel drive, and most people, we don't go off-road, do we? So probably better for most people, and certainly more fuel efficient as well. And actually, one thing I noticed when I just did a turnaround there was because it's only got a 1.6 litre engine under that pretty big bonnet, there's loads of space for the wheels to turn, so the turning circle is really very good. In fact, the usability overall is actually pretty good in this car, and nowhere is that clearer than when you look at the interior. So let's take a closer look. Now, the interior in this car is so DS. It's got all the usual trinkets that we find in the latest DS models, including lots of little details and bits of chrome and kind of effects that many other manufacturers wouldn't touch, but DS really embraces it. And I think for some buyers it's going to be a bit cluttered, but for others they're probably going to like how unique it is. But the first thing I noticed when I got in the car was just how comfortable this seat is. It's got really squidgy and supportive cushions. I know that sounds like they contradict themselves, but it is just really nice, and it goes with the car's character of being a bit soft and a bit nice and comfortable around the edges. And also the dash as well. I mean, yeah, there are a few features that some people might find a bit fussy, but actually when you get used to it and you get used to the layout, it's really good. Having the window switches down here is a bit weird. I keep going like this, but I guess you'll get used to that. But actually the infotainment system, having shortcut buttons for your climate control and also for your home button as well to get you back to the start is really useful. And then the infotainment system itself is really reactive and fast. It's smartphone-like in many ways, although still not my favorite. A little bit hard to get through the menus, but because it's quick to respond, you forgive it. I like the instrument cluster ahead of me here as well. It's much wider than you get in other DS models, and it's very sharp graphics, really clear, and a nice design. And then you've got some buttons on the steering wheel as well. Just overall, it's just a nice place to be. Because this is a performance line car, it's got suede where other cars have leather, so maybe it's not quite as plush as those, but it feels sporty, and actually it looks quite nice having a bit of contrasting finish in the cabin. Up front, definitely, it's a very nice place to be. And I haven't even mentioned how much storage space there is in this car. You've got cup holders here, stuff down here, really wide cubby holes in the door, and check this out, a really deep storage section down here, which goes in really, really far. You could put like a leg of lamb in there if you're not vegetarian. And in the back, it's massive. There's loads of room, loads of space for my feet. I mean, there's acres of knee room here, and same goes for the headroom above me. Loads of room here and loads of room here. Tons and tons of space. You're not gonna have problems in the back here. You've got a very wide armrest here as well, obviously with some cup holders. And if you're a middle seat passenger, it's not too bad because this is a front wheel drive car. You don't have a drive shaft going through here, so there's no tunnel, which means I've got space for my feet in there, and I've also got lots of room. It's pretty wide at either side of me. I mean, my shoulders might be rubbing those of the people next to me, but I've got lots and lots of headroom as well. So it's a big space in the back. And around the back, things are pretty much the same. It's a pretty big boot. I mean, this is a big car, so you've got lots of space here, although obviously, and this is true for all hybrids, the boot is compromised. So you don't have underfloor storage down here like you would in a straight petrol model. You've got a bit of room here, but ultimately it's just all of this bit up here because the batteries, of course, are under the boot floor. You do get a bag to put your cables in, but it will have to sit up here, so you lose a bit of space. But come on, there's a lot of room in here, and I can demonstrate that with our suitcase, which goes in no problems whatsoever. I mean, you could get smaller bags around there. You could probably get another small suitcase in there, and then if you take this out, I'm sure you could get a couple more on top as well. So for the airport run, I don't think you're gonna have much trouble whatsoever. So that's a quick review of the DS7 E-Tense in performance line trim. I like it. I think it's a good car. It rides really nicely, but it's not sporty at all. Don't be fooled by the badge. It's not a performance car, it just has a few bits on the trim basically. But it's a nice thing overall, and I think if you don't want to go with the usual and quite predictable German options, this thing has got a lot to offer, especially when it comes to comfort and tech. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments below. Would you take this over, for example, the Q5 or the X3 or the GLC from Mercedes even? Let us know. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to click the thumbs up button, and of course subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We'll be back with more cars to review, and we'll be back at Rockingham very soon. See ya.